Welcome to the Jiu-Jitsu of Life podcast. This is episode number 91.
Hey, ho, for the fifth time.
That's right. Fifth time's the charm. I can believe it.
We're going to be much better the fifth time around.
Yeah,
I'll tell you.
we're true pros now.
Yeah. We'll probably get worse. But yeah, we were we were having some technical difficulties, but we're back now, and we were just talking about how you took a trip to your favorite place in the whole world, New Orleans.
Yes.
I don't know. That's not a secret, right? That's not a secret.
No, it shouldn't be.
People know where to find you now.
Yeah. Now, New Orleans is awesome if you know how to do it right. It's kind of like if you ever go to Vegas and you go to North Las Vegas, go to Old Vegas, but not even to that horrible like place with all the casinos, but just some of the areas surrounding it where Zappos is and like Tony Hsieh's RV park, and there's a Container Store mall, and there's like some like nice restaurants and stuff like that around it. And it's like this nice, pleasant place. And then all of a sudden you get to the strip, you're like, oh yeah, this is Vegas that people think is Vegas. Mm-hmm. New Orleans is like that with the place that we go to, which is Uptown. It's so nice. And there's the, what's it called? Forget the name. Tulane is the name of the university right over there. It's beautiful, beautiful campus. There's a great park over there. And it's just, there's all that just awesome architecture. These homes are 100, 150, 200 years old. And they all have like this natural gas that they use to like light the front porch. So instead of lights, that they're like just little gas lights that are always on because it's so efficient and it's so cheap to use it. And the food's great. People are super friendly. And it's just this great place. But if you were to venture to the French Quarter into Bourbon Street, you would say, wow, this seems just like the Strip in Vegas, only older. That's it. I mean, it's like there's just all these horrible, like, it's just gross. There's the smell of street urine all the time. There's just drunk people everywhere. It's just sloppy, just awful people. And it sucks. Yeah. Like, if that was the only part of New Orleans I knew, I'd go once and I'd be done. But if you venture out into the parts that to me are much more interesting, it's just an awesome place. So I think we did a nice combination of eating lots of desserts and stuff like that. But also we cooked a lot at the Airbnb this time, made some good meals there. So it was like a nice balance of good healthy eating, but also still enjoying a lot of local stuff. So I think to me, that's the key with the Airbnb. If you get the kitchen, we did this when we stayed in Destin a few years ago, which is really kind of touristy and really not my kind of place. But we found a great fish market. We cooked like a ton of really great stuff. So we had like a lot of really good meals. And then it was like, to me, that makes the difference. Like if you find yourself in sort of a touristy place, if you've got the Airbnb, my recommendation, don't keep going out there to these horrible like it'll depress me. Like, because we went to Destin, it was just like almost like a scene from Office Space, where it's like, you know, you're just how many pieces of flair, and everyone's like, how about some shots? You want some oysters? Yeah, like all this stuff. I'm like, oh God, this is terrible. But
oh man,
if we got to cook and do all that stuff, I'm like, okay, now we got some stuff that we really like, having some great food. Now we can appreciate just kind of hanging out at the Airbnb and like reading a little bit. It makes it way better. So, you know, that, to me, that's the way to sort of have the combination of going out, but still having some good stuff. That way I don't feel like disgusting when I come back too. It's like I still feel, plus they have a good gym. So I got some good lifting in. My quest to stay as buff as possible continues. That's exciting. My wife has a great yoga place that she likes to go to. So she got some yoga. I lifted some weights. We ate some good food. It was glorious. She got super, super sick at the end, but it was still a great time. So
good. It was fun. Well, we're glad you're back. Glad you had a good time. Hope Chantel gets to feeling better soon.
Me too.
I know there's been like the flu's been going around. Here.
Yeah, it was supposedly really bad in New Orleans too. So I think that's where, I think that's where she got it. So, but yeah.
Well, nice, man. I know that we were talking before we started recording.
Yeah.
And just talking about random things because we didn't really have an idea of what we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah.
And as we were just talking about randomly, and that's, it's funny because that's kind of how our podcast got started. We were just talk about business, and
Yeah.
these random ideas would come up, and we found how they related to jujitsu.
Hmm.
One of the random ideas that just kind of came up as we were talking was about how we used to set goals,
Yeah.
and specifically how you used to set goals,
Uh-huh.
and like how that's changed over time and how you kind of set goals now. And we're talking specifically in terms of business, but
Yeah.
as we were talking about that, you said something. It was a good one liner. It was like, man, people start to set the wrong goals,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Something along the lines of that.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? That is perfect for business, but not just for business, but for jujitsu,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
was the guy. I remember, being a brand new white belt, and I look back at the goals that I set for myself, and they were so unrealistic. But at the
Sure.
same time, I think that they're goals that, like, just every new white belt that comes to the door probably sets for themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
my goal as a brand new white belt was like, I'm never gonna get tapped, and
Yeah.
like I failed. I did nothing but fail and fail and fail. And if anybody sets that goal as a brand new white belt, that's you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail as a
Yeah.
blue and a purple and a brown and all the way up to black. And
Yeah.
and even then, right? Like you should never make it a goal not to get tapped. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not learning anything from that, and it's just unrealistic, right? You're gonna get tapped.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, and then I had this unrealistic goal of like, I'm gonna be the guy that's out there tapping everybody,
Yeah.
and that's I'm still waiting for that goal to happen, because it's not it's
Me
not
too.
happening. Yeah, I still haven't accomplished the other goal of not getting tapped.
Yeah. Yeah. Me neither.
So setting these unrealistic goals that
Yeah.
really become toxic might be a strong word, but unhealthy, because
Yeah.
they're unrealistic.
Yeah.
And you want so it's again, when we started the jujitsu of life, one of the main concepts was balance, right?
Yeah.
Balance in jujitsu,
Yes.
balance in business.
Yeah.
And I think that when it comes to setting goals, we are going to talk today about having balance in your goals. You don't want to set a
Yeah.
goal that is unrealistic, but you
Yeah.
don't also want to set a goal where you're just undercommitted
Yeah.
uh, to it, right?
Yeah.
So I'll let you take it from here, and kind of
Yeah.
me, how you used to set goals, how you set them now, and why
Yeah.
that's changed, and how can we apply this to jujitsu?
Yeah. So I think a lot of this, of course, depends on knowing yourself and knowing how you respond best. So some people need to do super ambitious goals, and that's what gets them up. And there was a guy that I used to train with a long time ago who would always say, "Is like the only way I can train consistently is if I have a tournament coming up, because then I have motivation, because I want to do well, or more realistically, I don't want to do badly. I don't want to lose and embarrass myself." And that's what motivated him. And he was a good competitor. He won the world championships in Brazil a couple times at different belt
Wow.
levels, things like that. But when he stopped competing, he kind of, he gained a lot of weight and all this kind of stuff, because it was like his whole motivation thing was competition. And once competition was gone, a lot of his motivation was gone. But he knew himself, and he knew this is the way he stayed motivated. So if he ever was going to come back, it probably would have to be he's going to come back and compete again. Um, just have to know like what gets you motivated. So when it comes to goals, what I was doing was getting really specific on things that I don't say don't matter, but were distracting. So for finance or business and things like that, it would always be like, okay, I'm going to do this many deals, and I'm going to make this much per deal, and I'm going to do all these things. And every time I would get super specific like that, it would all fall apart. It would always fall apart. Even this year, I did it maybe in June. I had like some goal by September 30th. I'm going to have this number of homes under contract and do this and do that. And it failed spectacularly. So it's like a weird thing where it's like you're supposed to write your goals out, but what do you do when your goals fail? And it's like, well, um, number one, get better. But number two, I think it's also understanding like, well, this is maybe not be the way that I perform the best. And for me, I've realized that I do best when I have outlines that give me sort of guidance points, but still give me flexibility. And when I first realized this, it was, like I said, I'm team buff right now, and I've been lifting for weights for a long, long time before I started jiu-jitsu or anything like that. And I remember like I used to read all the magazines, and they would all have these like super, super specific routines that so-and-so supposedly did. And I would try and follow these routines. And the idea is like, okay, I'm going to do this thing for 3 weeks. And then after 3 weeks, you switch up and do this or whatever it would be. And I would always fail miserably to follow these programs. And it would be like this just devastating thing of like, oh God, I failed, or you're supposed to do this thing and you're supposed to get this much stronger. And I inevitably would not. And it was like such a mess with my head so much that after a while I'm like, okay, I like working out. It's never a problem to get to the gym. It's never a problem being motivated. But if I'm going to like let my emotional happiness, rise or fall due to my ability to follow this program, I'm going to be miserable forever. So rather than that, I'm just going to give myself guidelines on certain things. Like I'm going to, and that's always been the case for that. And that's served me well. And anytime I start finding myself trying to be too specific or too this or too that, it just makes my head spin too much. And it like, I get way too obsessed with things that don't matter versus looking at the bigger picture. So with jiu-jitsu, that can easily be like trying to tap everyone. That can easily be forcing certain submissions. That can be a lot of different things that sort of take you out of the moment, that take away the benefit from the training session. Because there can be times where you may have this plan, like, okay, I'm going to do this number of submissions and this thing's happen and blah, blah, blah. And immediately the guy is like past your guard and got in a good position and you're getting smashed. And it's like, well, maybe today's lesson is going to be about calm defense. Maybe that's all it's going to be. You thought it was going to be about all this offense, but the world is presenting you a great opportunity to learn something else that you didn't plan on learning. There's that old saying. Like,
I love that. Yeah.
What's the old saying? Like,
so yeah, with your with your goals, right? That you set this very specific goal.
Yes.
But then life presents you with something else that kind of it is guiding you, not forcing you, or maybe forcing you to like, no, you're gonna have to kind of shift your goal or change your goal, and you should. And I think some people are, you give the example of Robles sometimes. You're like, Mo, you don't give yourself any credit because I always say that it was luck, but you talk about the, being able to pivot, right? That you saw this opportunity with custom gis and somebody could have been like, we're just going to do that one time. We're going to stay focused on what our original goal was to make these stock gis and get them out there. So I love that. But what is that though, right? Like sometimes people are so just, there's no plan B. They're going to make plan A work. But what if the ship is sinking? And I think that happens a lot in jiu-jitsu.
Yes,
like
it does.
They're willing to go down with the sinking ship because they don't want to let go of that goal, but it's just an unrealistic goal. And there's I'm going off, but
no, you're right. You do see it a lot. And I think that when you notice that it's not there is when you see people learn how to adapt in mid fight, in mid roll. To me, John Jones is the best example in MMA of somebody who literally, you can watch him learn his opponent over a round or two, figure out everything they're doing, start shutting everything down, start playing that aspect of that opponent's game better than the opponent plays. And you see it's like this interesting sort of calculated mental warfare that he does. And if he had this plan of I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, sometimes that works great. Sometimes, I mean, the idea of like, going on autopilot and not thinking and just reacting and all that. But I think at the highest levels, it involves being able to adapt in the moment, being in the moment, really. And again, this just depends on people knowing themselves. But for me, like, I need that flexibility. If I go into any sort of jiu-jitsu situation, be it, a match, just training with someone or whatever, and I have all these things in my head that I want to do or like that I should do or whatever, a lot of times I'll start missing opportunities because I'm still stuck on this plan versus seeing what's there at that moment or feeling what's there at that moment. Versus if I'm looking at it where I just want to think about controlling my breathing, or maybe if I'm way too in my head, I'm going to close my eyes. That's a great way to sort of get out of your head.
Because I think the other way creates that tunnel vision, right?
It does. Yeah, it does. And so the analogy in boxing we've talked about is that, when people start trying to force the knockout, they fall in love with power. They fall in love with the results of it. And they stop thinking about what happened to set up the knockout. It could be that they went to the body for the first few rounds. It could be that they spent the first few rounds studying the person, and they start rushing it. They start overcommitting. And a lot of times that's where they themselves end up getting knocked out, or they get tired because they start forcing things. And when you want the results of something, sometimes there's this tendency to start fast forwarding through all the process that led to that good result. You see this most in fighting, I think, because it's such a pure, honest thing where you can see the fighter. The great example just happened last weekend with Ruiz. It was Andy Ruiz, is that his name? Where he won before against it was Anthony Joshua, right? He knocked him out.
Correct.
And he looked great. And then what happens? He comes in and he's like 18 pounds heavier. And it wasn't a good 18 pounds. He was already pretty fat. He came in significantly fatter, let's just say it. And he lost. And it's, he can beat the guy because we already saw him beat him once, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of what's going on with Joshua. Like, he's still capable of doing it. And he must have loved the notoriety because everyone thought he was going to lose. And he was really sort of a great champion for the average man because there's so many more people that look like Andy Ruiz than do look like Anthony Joshua. I mean, Anthony Joshua looks like, the prototypical action hero in a lot of ways. He's perfectly built and all this kind of stuff. Andy Ruiz is like, that's more like, hey, he's a regular guy. He came in, he did this. This is amazing. But rather than think about all the preparation that happened and the discipline at the gym and everything that he had to do to win that big moment, it was almost like instead of being underestimated, now he was the one underestimating Anthony Joshua and forgetting how good Anthony Joshua is, and thus he lost. So it's an example of, I think fighting is such a great example of people fast forwarding through what they did to prepare and just loving the results of what happened and wanting to relive that versus having to start all over again, going through the whole thing.
So when we talk about being specific and setting goals,
right.
And we're, now that you bring up fighting, I know that like for in boxing and even in MMA, some of the athletes get very specific. Where they bring their mental imagery into play. And they're like, okay, I am going to knock this guy out in the 8th round. And when they're doing their mental imagery, they're seeing round 1 how it goes, round 2 how it goes, and round 8 they're visualizing the knockout, visualizing what happens after the knockout with their hands being raised. They're getting very ultra specific.
Yeah.
Are you advocating the anti-goal? I almost like that. Like, I want to write a book like the anti-goal. Don't set goals.
No, I mean, and far be it from me. I mean, good Lord. I mean, these guys know a lot more about this stuff than I do. I guess the thing is with all that, I look at that as a lot of like, I don't want to call it superstition, but people always remember the time these things worked. Like, I envisioned this and it happened. I did all this stuff. What about all the times that it didn't? Because if the other guy is visualizing
that's
this,
so true.
Well, like maybe the other guy's visualizing, I'm going to knock this guy out in the 3rd round. I got this whole thing. And after this, I'm going to do this cool chicken dance after I win. And then I'm going to go, speaking of chicken, I'm going to have some chicken afterwards, all this stuff. And then what if it doesn't happen? You know what I mean? Like, so did he not visualize hard enough? I mean, like I think a lot of that stuff is sort of in hindsight. When it works, it's great. Because, I mean, Conor McGregor is a great example. He did sort of predict a lot of his early fights. I'm going to knock this guy out in the 2nd round, blah, 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 blah. And then he fought Nate Diaz. And he's like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And you could see, actually, that's a great example of him sort of forcing things. He was swinging with, especially with his left hand. It's normally like so accurate, and he was missing and over and like almost falling over when he was trying to hit him and stuff like that. He got tired and he lost. So it's like that predicting all these things that happened, Mystic Mac and all that. Well, sometimes, but not always. So
let me ask you this: how would you recommend nowadays, or how do you nowadays? Let's say you were going to write a goal. Can you share one of your goals for 2020? What it looks like?
Yeah. So okay. See, here's
in both. You know what? Actually, I would really love is if you would maybe share one of your goals in 2020 for both business and jiu-jitsu.
Okay. So business, the way I'm looking to do things differently is to really focus more on building up relationships rather than chasing specific deals. I find that when I chase the deal, there's definitely always, despite trying not to, there's always going to be sort of an emotional component towards starting to do numbers and getting excited about what all this can mean and this can lead to this and like all that kind of stuff. Versus remembering that the real power is to find consistency and find the ability to do things
I
more
love
than
that.
once. And a
Yeah.
lot of that is relationship dependent. So rather than worrying about, like, I'm going to look at some property on Thursday coming up, to me, it's much more that I want to meet the person who's showing the property, find out about them, find out about, you know, how they do things, their whole process, just kind of find out and meet up with people and really work on that part of it. If this specific deal is a winner, great. If it's not, it doesn't really matter. To me, it's more getting the feel of the area, kind of feeling what, what to look for, but then more than anything, really meeting the right people and involving that. Because a lot of the stuff that I'm looking to do is definitely bigger stuff, bigger price points, all that kind of thing. And a lot of that involves meeting the right people. Because if that's not in place, then to me, if that, it doesn't really matter how good that deal is, because I'm not going to go and be able to do all the things that need to be done in order for that deal to be a success. So I'd much rather focus working on the people. So, my goal this year is to just sort of break down into the different components that I'm looking to buy, like things I'm looking to get into, high-end Airbnbs, multifamily, office space, and things like that. And then
For me,
just break,
I would just listening to you, I
yeah,
would, if it was me, I'd write it down like building better business relationships.
yes,
That's and that's
yeah,
man, that's a great goal to have.
yeah. I think
That's a
that's,
fan. That's where like you said, consistency comes from, and
yeah,
I think that's where the best business comes from is
I think so
developing
too.
these great relationships.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And then I would even break it down so I can be specific in terms of saying, like, okay, let's say I've been talking about these high-end Airbnbs. Well, who do I need to know in that? I need to know realtors who specialize in high-end homes, 5, 6 bedrooms in nice areas. I need to focus on Airbnb property managers because that there are specific ones that do high-end type of homes. And then I would need to focus in on just some of the local things in terms of like handymen and some of the more specific things like that. But really, those first two, the realtors and then the managers, and develop relationships with them so that I can really start finding out, okay, what do you think about this particular deal? What do you think about that one? Versus, okay, I'm going to look at this one, and then try and meet the right manager, meet the right broker or whatever, because that's kind of backwards in a lot of ways. Because I don't want to do just one of something, especially if I can figure out how to make it work. I want to do a lot of them. I want to be able to bring in other investors on things. Actually, and that would be the third component is other investors in properties. And with that, I would want to go one-on-one, find people, and I already have some of these people in mind, find out what they're looking for, find out, what appeals to them, how much risk they're willing to take, all that kind of stuff. Again, on a sort of a one-on-one type of thing versus, again, chasing the deal, finding the right people and then figuring out where to put them in, I think is going to work a lot better. So just finding the key components of each asset type, be it multifamily, be it office, be it a high-end Airbnb, and who are the key people that I need to develop relationships with, and just take it from there and
Love
not
it.
worry about like, I'm going to do this many of this or this many of that. That to me, that the problem is okay, what if you don't? Like, what if for whatever reason you don't? Is the year a failure now? Is the year like it puts all this emotion on to me, like there's an emotional attachment to certain goals. And if I put it something super specific, then that's going to make me almost too happy if I get it and then too sad if I don't. And the goal shouldn't be to be emotional about certain goals because to me
Love it.
that's just sort of how I want to live my life. So that would be on
That's
that.
yeah, I like that. Don't be emotional about your goals.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and avoid quantifying things if
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah. And then in jujitsu, I would like to start spreading my wings out a little bit more again. I love the guys I train with. I want to start training with, making myself train with more people a little bit more often. That just means going to some different schools and doing things like that.
Mhm.
I've done that in the past. I used to do that all the time. I was consistently training at 3 different schools when I was back in California. I want to start doing that a little bit again, just to do that for whatever reason, because it's just something that is making me feel like insecure right now or something. I don't know what the insecure is not the right
You
word,
know what it
but
is. I mean, I know exactly. I feel like I know exactly what that is. That is comfort zone.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
We
exactly.
have a
Yeah,
we when you're training with your friends and your
yeah,
buddies and the people that you
yeah,
always train with, you're well within your comfort zone. But
exactly.
having to go to somebody else's school and
Yeah,
training with their guys,
yeah,
that's going outside the comfort zone. And I think
yeah,
that can be very healthy
yeah, yeah.
to a certain degree. I also think that there needs to be you still have to vet people,
You do.
especially where we're at in life. We're the
Yeah.
executive jiu-jitsu practitioner.
Yes. Yes. And I think I guess the thing is to me is really sort of test out a lot of the defensive stuff that I've worked on, which I think makes it much easier to go out of your comfort zone with people you don't know. Because I've sort of tested that a little bit, but I'd like to continue to test that
Hmm.
in different scenarios and stuff like that. So again, it's sort of a vague goal, but it's um, I don't know, it's intentionally vague, I guess. And that's sort of that because that if I start saying like I'm going to work on this, I'm going to work on that. I remember one year I was like I'm going to do 10,000 reps of whatever, and I literally got through one day of doing it and did not do it for the rest of the year. And it's like, okay, these are not the right type of goals for me because it has to be something that I can do consistently. And if it's something where it's just unattainable because it's just not fitting with my personality, I've come to accept that. So I think that's the real thing I think with goals is to really figure out what type of goal setting works for you. And it's so easy in the world of YouTube and things like that to get sucked into the trap of like listening to whatever expert in whatever subject say this is the way you should do it because invariably that's the way that works for that person or that's the way it works for that person in that course that they're selling to you by putting out this promotional video. But if it doesn't work for you, then that's sort of the non-starter. I mean, it's just one of these things where because there's so many different ways to be successful and stuff. There's so many different things where even in business, I mean, when I was listening to Sam Zell's book, and he started off mainly in real estate, but then he started buying up a lot of different companies, and he was just sort of like, what if it's a something that needs to be turned around and repositioned and things like that? What's the difference does it make if it's real estate or if it's something else? It's still a business that could be operated better. But he's like, I'm just an opportunist. I wouldn't like planning I'm going to do this, or this. It's like, this opportunity I saw and it made sense. So I did it. And once a lot of people were in this business, it's like, okay, now they're driving the prices up too much. So let me see where there's somewhere opportunity somewhere else. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do this for 3 years. And then after 3 years, no, it's just, okay, there's too many people now. These prices seem unrealistic to me. I'm going to go somewhere else and wait for these prices to fall, to drop, and then I'll go back in this and just sort of see where the opportunity is. So, and this guy has been super successful for a very, very long time. But then there's other people that are much more rigid in what they do, and they've also been successful. So that's the same case in jiu-jitsu. There's guys that drill all the time. There's guys that never drill. There's world champions that have done both. So to me, it's finding out what works best for you. Uh, and that definitely comes down to goal setting as well. So maybe that should be somebody's goal if they don't know. Find out what goal setting works for me, and that can be your goal.
There you go.
There we
I
go.
love
Boom.
it.
I think we're going out on
Episode
that.
91 in the books. That was
Nice.
fantastic, man. I learned a lot from it myself. I'm gonna go and erase all my goals that I have written down and redo them. Be sure to go to the jujitsuoflife.com so you can check out this podcast, our older podcast. Also, be sure to go to Apple iTunes, leave us a review. We love, Carter and I. We don't get paid, regardless of what a lot of people think that we're making a ton of money from the Jiu-Jitsu of Life.
Yeah.
But our payment is when I love it when people come up to me, and believe it or not, it's happened, Coco,
Yeah.
where they're
Yeah.
like, man, the Jiu-Jitsu of Life, that was I took something away from that and it
Yeah.
benefited me.
It's
That's happened a couple
it's
times.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that.
Yeah.
I love it. So
Yeah.
we love to read your reviews. If you have a quick 5 minutes, go to Apple iTunes, make our day, leave us a review. And as
Yes.
always, go to robles.com, makers of the world's finest custom jiu-jitsu apparel. And from both Carter and myself, we wish you guys nothing but the best, both on and off the mat. Have a great week and take care, guys.
Thank you guys.